Hi, and welcome to this series where I'm going through the IT management approaches, models, methodologies, activities, and practices. And I'll be giving you the main headline points, the base foundation knowledge you need to know. I'll also be discussing some of my real world applications of these activities and practices in the various organisations I've worked in. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, and click the bell for those updates. Okay, so let's get to it. Today I'm going to be covering off the key concepts in SIAM, Service Integration and Management. We've already covered off the SIAM layers, SIAM structures, drivers in previous videos, so do check those out on my channel. This video, though, we're going to dig a little deeper into the SIAM Roadmap. Okay, so when you say roadmap, what do you mean? Okay, so this is the various stages that you would go through. It's the activities you would complete to take a customer along the journey into the SIAM world. So bringing them into this SIAM model, this SIAM ecosystem, you're creating, you're transforming. It's got 4 stages to it. They're discovery and strategy, plan and build, which is what we're about to focus on now, implement and run and improve. And then within each stage, there's 5 activities, if you like, and they're objectives, triggers, the inputs to that, the activities specifically around that stage, and outputs. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into the plan and build stage. It's worth pointing out that as we go through the stages and the various elements within each stage, it's not a formal checklist that you have to do to the letter and you have to stick a tick next to each one. It's not a predefined approach here. However, it is a recommended approach. It is an optimized approach. It's a proven way to deliver SIAM. So you may find there's going to be elements within the stages or the activities that you're not necessarily doing as much as you might feel you should be or you are, but it's not a you have to go through this is a checklist and tick next to each item. Clearly each customer is going to be different. They're going to be in different sectors, different governance requirements, regulatory, state, corporate governance, different types of drivers and different timescales as well. So the plan and build stage, this follows the discovery and strategy stage. So I've done a video on that previously. Do have a look at that. But this is basically the next stage. So you've done the discovery and strategy, you've done the due diligence, the understanding element, and what the driver is, and now you're planning it, now you're building it. Some of the items as we go through this roadmap work in parallel, some are linear. Again, it's all dependent on the customer and the unique circumstances, so you may find elements work in parallel and other elements are just in a straight line. Within the previous stage, the discovery and strategy, hopefully we now should have a base, a high-level structure, a framework, an alignment, an approach to work within. And this stage is now about helping creating that model. So the first step here within plan and build is objectives. So what are the objectives? Well, the output from the discovery and strategy stage, this is going to help you design the transformation plan, how you're going to do it. The main objectives that you need to be thinking through here is you're completing a model, a design of the SIAM model, and the services that are in and the services that are not in scope here. You're going to be looking to obtain full approval of the model overall. So which model is going to be best here? Is it going to be the internal model, the external model, the hybrid, or the lead supplier? And again, I've done videos on each one of those models, so please do check those out. But within the objectives here, you're getting the full approval of How are we going to do it? Is it going to be internal, external, hybrid, or lead supplier? And then you'll go through an activity of appointing service integrators and service providers. Sometimes you'll see that abbreviated to SI for service integrator and SP for service provider. And then you start something called organizational change management. Quite often you'll see that as OCM. And there are various models you can use to deliver that. And there's good approaches. There's something called an ADCAR model, and each element is something you need to consider when you're going through organizational change. So the A is awareness, D is desire, K is the knowledge, A is the ability, and R is the reinforcement of that message. So if you spell that out, you get the word ADCAR. Another point just to be aware as you're thinking through objectives here, and certainly through this whole plan and build stage, and within the discovery and strategy stage as well, is watch out for shadow IT, where you've got people within the business perhaps working directly with service providers but under the radar a bit, so outside of the IT governance model. Keep an eye out for shadow IT. So that's the objectives. What are the triggers? Well, the stage for plan and build, that trigger is basically where you've completed the stage before that, which is the discovery and strategy. So you've got that confirmation that it does intend to proceed with this activity and this implementation. You know what the drivers are, you know that sort of the rough kind of concepts and overview and high level drive behind it. So that's what would trigger this stage effectively, is you've gone through a discovery and strategy stage, and the output of that is, yes, we intend to proceed, we want to carry on. Inputs. Now, basically the inputs to this stage are the outline business case and that high level model and that framework that we were just talking about a moment ago, that when you've completed your discovery and strategy stage, when you've assessed the as-is situation, you understand the drivers, you've got a very rough business case and broadly how this could work and what the control framework would be around it. So that's the input to this stage. So governance requirement would be another area. So perhaps there's corporate governance you need to consider, regulatory governance or state. Perhaps there's a Sarbanes-Oxley governance requirement in there, or a HIPAA law, federal regulatory standards that start to come in there as well. You've defined the principles and the policies for roles and responsibility in that stage. So you've got the headline principles, the policies for the roles, the responsibilities, maybe not the full detailed during the discovery and strategy stage, but you've got the headline information. That detail is now going to start to come on. And as well, perhaps in that roles and responsibility element, you're going to want to think about segregation of duties, particularly if you're in a regulated environment. Where does the boundary start and where does it finish? What about delegated authority? And then maturity and capability levels will have been considered. So you will have baseline processes, looked at the organization as a whole, both in terms of maturity and the capability, practices, people, resourcing, assets, tooling. Market awareness, you will have looked at what's out there, what service providers are out there, what service integrators are out there. You will have got the approved outline business case and the strategy for SIAM and that outline SIAM model. This stage, there's quite a lot of further definition, further refinement, further detail being added here. So it's one of these stages where it is a little iterative, and agile works very well in this approach, as to let's just get a bit more information, a bit more of an incremental gathering in terms of information, and play that back. So we've covered the objectives, we've covered the triggers, we've covered the inputs. What about the activities within this stage, within the plan and build stage? Well, part of these roadmap stages for activities, you're now going to design and you're going to add the detail to the SIAM model. You're going to get the full business case approved. You're going to start to look at, okay, how's organizational change management, how's OCM actually going to work? So you're considering awareness, you're considering desire, you're considering knowledge, ability, and reinforcement of messaging here. So you're starting that activity in terms of OCM. How's that going to work? How do you commence that change management? So change management here in the context of plan and build is very much about the people organizational change management. Then you're going to be appointing two elements here, the SI and the SP, so the service integrator and the service provider. And then you're also, as you're appointing, you're going to be looking at, okay, well, perhaps there's SPs there that are just not pulling the weight, or it's just not working, or it's not been a good experience. Maybe they don't want to come along into the SIAM ecosystem. I've certainly seen that in organizations where, as a customer, we've lost service providers, not because they didn't have the capability, they just didn't want to fall into a SIAM model. So there's a retirement element there, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get at, is that you may well have some service providers that are either not fit for use or fit for purpose there in terms of the new ecosystem, or they may just not want to be involved in a SIAM environment. And then you're going to be reviewing this stage, and you're going to start to think about the implementation and approving that. So if we dig perhaps a little deeper into the design of the detailed SIAM model, this is one of the critical elements here. So we're thinking about the detail of how is this going to work over the whole ecosystem. So when we talk about ecosystem here, we're talking about the three layers: the customer organization, the service integrator, and the service provider. And that there's focus, there's activities, there's responsibilities within each layer. But as a customer organization, you'll have retained capabilities, and I've covered that off in other videos. But that's the strategic level. Then the service integrator, the SI level. So that's the integration bit, that's the collaboration, that's getting all the service providers to work together and provide that value as an end-to-end offering. And then the service provider layer is the delivery element of that. So this designing of the SIAM model in detail, it's going to contain lots of different elements. There's going to be lots of different bits that will make this up. What's the service model? What's the approach for sourcing? What does the structure look like? What about process models? Governance. We've already spoke about governance a few times in terms of what kind of governance model needs to be in place. What about separation of duties? What about regulatory laws? What about state laws? And then roles and responsibilities. So in the previous stage of discovery and strategy, we had sort of like the headline information, the summary kind of roles and responsibilities. This stage now, this is the detail. This is now when we're saying, okay, when it comes to roles and responsibilities, we want the details: how, who, and performance management and reporting framework. What kind of requirements are needed there? Collaboration, a really key word there within SIAM. There's a difference between cooperation and collaboration, and collaboration is what we're working towards here. We're working towards a shared vision. You're going to be thinking about the tools that are there, and you're going to be thinking around tools in a very wide way and a very detailed way. You're going to be thinking through your architecture, enterprise architecture. What about functional and non-functional requirements as well? Integration, but not only just technical integration. What about logical integration? Mapping as well. There's lots of good techniques there that I've spoken about previously about how can you map, how can you data map effectively, how do you avoid things like this swivel chair approach, how do you make sure that you're using recognized techniques. Again, have a look on my channel. I've got some tips and ideas and thoughts around that. And then ownership as well, and access control, and the security, and the measurement and the reporting of tooling as well. So don't just think tooling as a single item to complete as an element. That you have to look at it holistically. There's a lot of effort and there's a lot of work in there involved in that. And then how are you going to make it better? What's the continual improvement approach? How are you going to work these through? My experience of plan and build is it tends not to be sequential. There tends to be lots of things happening simultaneously here, and it's quite agile in that there's an ongoing iteration activity here that is adding detail and playing that back. And then as we get to the output, so within this plan and build stage, we've done the objectives, we've gone through triggers, we've gone through inputs, we've gone through activities. Now we're going to talk about the output. So what's coming out of this activity? Well, you will have a full design of the SIAM model. And what do we mean by that? We mean things like the service providers, the service groups, and the services. If you collectively put those together, people will talk about what's the service model. So it's worth just reiterating that when people talk about what's the service model, what's the model overall, within that you're including service providers, the groupings, and what the services are. You've got the structure. So you've got the selected SIAM structure, how you're going to do this. The models for processes, models for practices, structural elements. So what do we mean when we talk about structural elements? Well, remember there's 3 types of structural elements. You've got boards, you've got process forums, you've got working groups. Each one you need to think through. Change advisory board's quite a common board that's mentioned. Roles and responsibility, governance models here. So it needs to be correct and in line with whatever governance or regulatory control or what kind of environment you're working in. It needs to make sure that it aligns to that governance. And that may be corporate, or that may be regulatory, or it may be financial, or it may be health. Whatever it is, you have to produce output from the plan and build stage, which is this is the governance element of it. But also how do you govern it internally as well? So it's not always external governance, it's what's the governance internally. And then performance management and ongoing reporting. What's that framework? What's that going to look like in terms of how and who and so on and so forth? Collaboration is such a key point here in the output of plan and build. You need to make sure that there's an agreed collaborative approach within the ecosystem. How's this going to work? Is everyone going to play nicely together? How are you going to make sure that you achieve that collaboration and that you can demonstrate collaboration? That's a really key point when it comes to the performance management and reporting. So as a customer, it's not unusual for a customer to say, demonstrate to me the value of SIAM, and collaboration is a real point to think through there as to how can you demonstrate you are indeed providing the customer better collaboration with all of its service providers. And then tooling strategy as well is another output. So we've already spoke about tooling in terms of taking a view of tooling at an enterprise level, a functional or non-functional level, the mapping, the ownership, the access, the reporting, and how do we keep that going in terms of the improvement elements. So just going back to groupings there for a very quick second. When we talk about the design of the SIAM model and service groups. So what I mean by service groups, to help you kind of understand what that means, is it's those chunks of areas that are providing support. So that may be your application support function, or maybe your development function, and those can be internal, those can be external, they can be offshore, they can be onshore. It's your service desk function, or your cloud provider maybe, or your local area network service, or your wide area network service, or your voice or data, whatever it may be. You're able to split that that group into, oh, that's a networking group, or that's a EUC, end user computing, or that's hosting, or that's data, or that's application related, whatever it may be. When we talk about groupings, the SIAM model needs to take those into considerations, and there's going to be elements you need to consider there around availability of service providers. Are they internal within the customer, or are they external? Are they onshore? Are they offshore? How expensive are they? Have a look at those contracts with the service providers. What's the cost there? Are they suitable? Are they a good fit? Do they align with the practice? Perhaps there's a regulatory practice in there as an example. Do they really align to that standard? And then how feasible is it from a technology, from a capability perspective? Maybe there's even a time zone element or a language element that you need to consider there as well. Do you need multi-language, or is it just half a dozen languages you need, or is it just a single language? The other remaining outputs will be the approved business case. We've spoken about organisational change management and the ADCAR model. This is where it starts to be firmed up in terms of how we're going to raise awareness. How do we bring about desire? How do we make sure the knowledge and the abilities is assessed, and we understand it and we know it? And how we're going to reinforce that message? How is that going to be communicated? And as we say, the outputs around the service integrators and the service providers, there's going to be some appointments there. There's going to be some retirements in there as well. Okay, so that's the end of the plan and build stage. Just to remind you, we've gone through objectives, we've gone through triggers, we've gone through inputs, activities and outputs. Please do subscribe to my channel, and I'll continue to post information and provide more material. Thank you.